In the late 16th century, a storm was gathering over the Netherlands. Not a storm of wind and rain, but of steel, faith, and a relentless desire for freedom. These were the Spanish Netherlands, a collection of 17 provinces under the iron fist of the Spanish Empire, the most powerful force in the world. Life here was once prosperous, a hub of trade and art. But now a shadow had fallen. Spanish troops patrolled the cobblestone streets of Antwerp and Brussels, their armor a constant, chilling reminder of who was in charge. In the taverns, the clinking of tankards was quieter, the conversations hushed. Whispers of heavy taxes imposed by a distant king, Philip II, filled the air. These weren't just taxes to fund a foreign empire. They were a crippling burden, draining the lifeblood from Dutch commerce. But it was more than just money. A new, more terrifying pressure was mounting. Spain, a devoutly Catholic nation, demanded absolute religious conformity. The Protestant Reformation had taken deep root in the Netherlands, but under Spanish rule, practicing this faith was a crime punishable by death. The Inquisition's shadow loomed large, and neighbors began to eye each other with suspicion. In secret rooms lit by a single candle, merchants, artisans, and nobles gathered. They spoke of lost rights, of their ancient privileges being trampled. They were Dutchmen, Flemings, Walloons, proud people who had governed themselves for centuries. Now, they were subjects of a foreign power that saw them as little more than a source of wealth and a hotbed of heresy. This simmering discontent, this quiet, desperate anger, was a powder keg waiting for a spark. And that spark was about to be lit by a man known as the Iron Duke. In 1567, King Philip sent his most ruthless general, the Duke of Alba, to crush the growing unrest. Alba arrived not with offers of peace, but with an army of 10,000 veteran soldiers and a mandate to restore order through terror. He established the Council of Troubles, soon to be infamous as the Council of Blood. Among the first to fall were two of the Netherlands' highest-ranking nobles, the Counts of Egmont and Hoorn. Their public beheadings in Brussels sent a shockwave of horror and outrage across the provinces. Alba's message was clear. There would be no compromise, only submission. But instead of breaking the Dutch spirit, he forged it into a weapon. The quiet whispers of rebellion turned into a roar. From his exile in Germany, a figure emerged to lead the charge, William of Orange, also known as William the Silent. Once a trusted courtier of the Spanish king, he now cast his lot with his people, becoming the heart and soul of the resistance. He issued letters of marque, giving privateers, the infamous sea beggars, license to attack Spanish shipping. The revolt had begun. It was a desperate, almost hopeless fight. A scattered collection of rebels against the disciplined, battle-hardened tercios of the Spanish army, the most feared infantry in Europe. The early years of the war were a brutal slog. City after city was besieged, sacked, and its inhabitants massacred by the Spanish. The cry "Remember Haarlem" became a rallying call for the Dutch, a reminder of the atrocities committed by the victorious Spanish troops. Yet, with every defeat, the will to resist only grew stronger. This was no longer just a political conflict. It had become a war for survival. But how could a small, fractured nation defeat a global superpower? The Dutch found their answer not in a grand army, but in the very land they fought to defend. The Netherlands, the Low Countries, is a land reclaimed from the sea, a delicate balance of dikes, canals, and windmills. And in this geography, the Dutch rebels discovered their ultimate weapon. As Spain's powerful armies marched inland, confident in their strength, the Dutch made a fateful decision. They would surrender their land to save their nation. Imagine the scene. Spanish tercios, confident and seemingly invincible, are laying siege to a key Dutch city, perhaps Leiden. They have built their camps, dug their trenches, and are slowly starving the city into submission. Victory seems inevitable, but then Dutch engineers, under the cover of night, begin the work. With spades and axes, they attack not the Spanish army, but their own defenses against the sea. They breach the great dikes that have held back the North Sea for generations. At first, it's just a trickle, but then the trickle becomes a flood. The cold, dark waters of the sea pour onto the flat, low-lying farmlands. What was once solid ground, perfect for marching armies, transforms into a muddy, treacherous swamp. The Spanish soldiers watch in disbelief as their camps are submerged. Their cannons sink into the mire. Their supply lines are cut off, swallowed by the rising tide. The Dutch, in their shallow draft boats, suddenly have the advantage, sailing over what were once fields and roads, resupplying their besieged cities and attacking the stranded, helpless Spanish. The Spanish army, trained for land battles on the plains of Europe, was utterly unprepared for this new kind of warfare. They were trapped in a cold, watery hell. The rising floods were not a swift, clean death. It was a slow, agonizing demise. Soldiers in heavy armor, trying to retreat through the deepening mud, found themselves weighed down, sinking into the cold ooze. Regiments were broken apart, scattered by the encroaching sea, picked off one by Dutch sharpshooters in boats. The landscape itself became an enemy. Fog rolled in from the sea, hiding a Dutch ambush. A sudden storm could raise the water level by inches, swallowing the last patches of dry ground where terrified soldiers had taken refuge. The very element that the Dutch had spent centuries fighting was now their most powerful ally. Nature itself was at war with the Spanish Empire. The drownings were not just a military tactic, they were a psychological masterstroke. They showed that the Dutch were willing to sacrifice everything, their homes, their farms, their very land for their freedom. For the Spanish soldiers, it was a nightmare. These were men who had fought and won battles across the world, from the Americas to the heart of Europe. But here, in the flooded lowlands, their discipline, their courage, and their steel meant nothing. They were fighting an enemy they couldn't see, an enemy that rose from the ground beneath their feet. The water was relentless, unforgiving. It soaked their gunpowder, rusted their swords, and chilled them to the bone. It was a miserable, inglorious end, sinking into a muddy grave far from home. The strategic flooding of the Dutch countryside marked a turning point in the 80 Years' War. It showed the world that Spain, the seemingly unbeatable superpower, could be brought to its knees. The Dutch proved that a people's will, combined with a deep understanding of their own land, could overcome even the mightiest of armies. The war would rage for decades more, but the tide had turned. The fields and farms, sacrificed to the sea, would eventually be reclaimed. And upon this foundation of water, mud, and incredible sacrifice, an independent nation, the Dutch Republic, would be born. A testament to the idea that sometimes, to win a war, you must be willing to let the sea wash it all away. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this journey into history, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more stories like this.